And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska aviation weather outlook on this Friday, March 14th, 2025. And the way things are shaping up over the course of this weekend, we don't have any really strong weather systems, but some stuff is going on. We're going to start out here later this Friday night into Saturday morning. Frontal system out in the western Bering, have some gale force winds and a band of precipitation. So IFR conditions out in the far western Aleutians early Saturday morning. We also have some areas of IFR along the west arm of the Alaska Range up into the southwest and western interior, all the way back toward the Seward Peninsula. Also perhaps a pocket here north of Mentasta Pass, upper Tanana Valley. And then we find along the Arctic coast stronger winds. We have a strong high pressure up there in the Arctic Ocean with these northeast to east winds causing blowing snow. So areas along the Arctic coast could see IFR conditions, and then MVFR, southern panhandle, western Gulf, back out into the Bering. For Saturday afternoon, there's a couple weak areas of low pressure. One of them will eventually pull back toward the western Gulf here off the eastern Kenai by Sunday. The front out to the west advances with a band of IFR conditions pushing into the central Aleutians. We still have some gusty winds and blowing snow between Utqiagvik, especially down toward the Lisburn Peninsula. What's going to happen, that gradient will relax a little bit so that the stronger winds are going to be along the south slopes here, the Brooks Range, for the latter half of the weekend, then coming off of this point here off of, say, Point Hope, and especially between there and Point Lay, Cape Lisburn area will have some of the stronger winds. And then we find IFR conditions along the west arm of the Alaska Range, especially Lake Clark, Merrill up through near Windy Pass. And then with this little couple areas of low pressure either side of Haida Gwaii, going to pull up some precipitation, even some snow into areas of the southern panhandle as we get into Saturday night, Sunday. IFR conditions expected there across the southern part of the panhandle. And then we find with a push of moisture, some IFR conditions along central western Alaska Range all the way up through the western interior. And then again, this is that frontal system out through the Bering and into the central eastern Aleutians. And then for Sunday afternoon, still some areas of IFR across the southern panhandle, MVFR into the Gulf along Prince William Sound, and still finding some areas of IFR, central western Alaska Range, and then continuing along that area of especially the Lisburn Peninsula, Cape Lisburn up to Point Lay. Gustier winds could keep some blowing, drifting snow going there. Though down to the south and west, we find that front kind of losing some of its punch, but still IFR conditions going all the way back toward the Pribilofs into the eastern Aleutians and up through the tip of the Alaska Peninsula. Past conditions Saturday in the far north there in the Brooks Range. Anaktuvik-Adigan Pass VFR is expected there. And then as we get down here in the west arm of the Alaska Range, Lake Clark and Merrill looking at some IFR conditions, lower ceilings. Could be some areas of some lighter snow, generally speaking, but just those lower ceilings with some upslope flow of moisture. And then Rainy Pass IFR. Coming around to Windy Pass, MVFR becoming IFR. So some of those IFR conditions may advance a little more northeastward along the Alaska Range. Isabel Pass should generally be MVFR on Saturday, and further east Mentasta Pass also generally MVFR, though if you get further north of the north entrance toward the upper Tanana Valley, there could be some areas of IFR Saturday afternoon. Across the Copper River Basin, Tanita Pass, MVFR to start the day, becoming VFR. Kind of have a bit of a area there where VFR conditions through the mid portion there of the Copper River Basin, and then dropping down to Portage Pass, generally MVFR in the morning hours, giving way to VFR. And finally, out there in the North Panhandle, Chilkoot and White starting out Saturday morning, MVFR giving way to VFR conditions. So looking at freezing levels, at the surface, the freezing line is actually pushed south of the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula down into the North Pacific, and then it runs up along Cook Inlet, especially the east side of the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, and then into the inner channels of the middle and southern Gulf, Panhandle. So the air has been cooler. We anticipated this cooling trend across the mainland through this mid-month period leading up to the mid-month. So that's pretty much come to pass. We don't have any really big bumps in the freezing levels aloft, signaling warmer air being drawn in by a strong low or frontal system. So overall across the state, fairly uniform temperatures. Now, moisture distribution, there's going to be a couple of lows, especially latter half of the weekend, that kind of just rotate out through Haida Gwaii up here and will impact and bring some rain and snow to especially the southern parts of the panhandle here as we get into Saturday night and Sunday. So there could be some moderate icing either side there of Haida Gwaii above 4,000 feet. As we get out here toward the western Gulf and coming up over the Alaska range and into areas of the central interior, we could find some isolated icing above 4,000 feet, and then certainly more so down here across areas of the North Pacific, southeast of the Alaska Peninsula. And then behind me, with that frontal system pushing through the western Aleutians, a band of some mixed precipitation and rain. So freezing levels there are fairly low, but getting those clouds that are producing the precipitation, thicker cloud cover, greater moisture content above 4,000 feet, there could be moderate icing out there. So here's the pattern. We have generally this broad upper level trough over Alaska, northwest Canada. This is what's facilitated a little cooler temperatures. Little ridging out here, though, over the Bering Sea, Aleutians, and pushing up toward the Alaska Peninsula. On Saturday, not much in the way at mid-level areas of the 700 millibars, so 9,000 feet. We do note the easterly flow across the North Slope, Arctic Chukchi Sea coast. And then here's that low way back out here toward the southwest Bering frontal system ahead of it. A band of stronger winds, 35 to as high as 55 knots. And then mainland, fairly quiet except in the far north at 3,000 feet. We have those polar easterlies and the strongest winds coming up there along that Cape Lisburne area, with perhaps upwards of 55 knots. And then as we look behind me, we have the low pressure out here in the southwestern Gulf, the front. Some pretty decent winds along that front, as high as locally 50 to 65 knots there south of the central Aleutians. So what does this translate to in terms of turbulence for Saturday? The Aleutians, moderate turbulence covering much of them up into the lower Alaska Peninsula, but this area here, especially the central western Aleutians, widespread moderate turbulence, and I wouldn't rule out even some isolated severe turbulence, surface to 3,000 feet. Over the central interior, just along and north of the middle upper Yukon, say from the Yukon Flats, south side here of the Brooks Range, we could find some moderate turbulence, surface to 4,000 feet, and then also off of this region of the northwest Chukchi Sea coast from Point Hope up to Point Lay, Wainwright, including Cape Lisburne. There may be some moderate turbulence Saturday, surface to 3,000 feet.